Hey everyone, we've made it to the final session. Well done. I really should have gone to the toilet at the start, but we've got half an hour here with some great experts from the publishing space as well. So I think before we get into it, and you can see who the guys are behind me, so I won't spend time introducing. I just did a bit of a human scrape over the last 2 hours to get some key themes. And the reason why I want to touch on that first is I think we're going to cover every single one of those themes on this panel as well. So really quickly, we had Greg really focusing in on the evolution of search, Renee, the elevation of humans. Adrian said that search wasn't dead for the 300th time this year. JJ touched on some publisher challenges that we'll touch on here as well. Natalie showed a real-life example of evolution uncovering new opportunities. Karen and Chloe both said that brands matter more than ever. Dan said the last 12 to 18 months have taken their toll on the industry and his hairstyle. And then Clare touched on metrics changing. Diagnostic was what was said by Gay as well. And then that final sales session, which was wonderful. In marketing, Reddit, car sales, and LinkedIn, we definitely do trust, I think was the key theme that came out of that. So yeah, think about those key themes because these guys are going to touch on every single one of those. And it's great to have such an expert panel from all corners of the publishing world today. So welcome, Scott, Zoe, Claire, and Nick. I'm going to get straight into it. I'm going to start with you, Scott. When you look at your traffic dashboards over the last 12 to 18 months, what's the single biggest shift?
For us, it's probably been a rarity that I think it's actually pretty positive. We've seen a 49% growth in our organic search since February, which is pretty rare. I think one of the key things... Oh, sorry, I don't think it was on. One of the key contributors to that is that we've banned the publishing of AI content to our site. So we make sure everything published is human written. We use AI in the preparation of our content and research and things like that, but we make sure everything comes from our expert journalists. For the broader industry, it's not as positive. News publishers' traffic globally is around 33% down year on year. There was a published article in Press Gazette this morning saying it's expected to halve further by the end of the year. For us, we've also seen some increases in our direct traffic, which has been really positive. It's gone from about a fifth of our traffic to about a third. So we're really focused on building that first-party data and getting people subscribed. So I think looking at people who are not publishing AI slop, have expert journalists on their panels, I really have a niche expertise and focus in the sorts of content that they publish as well, particularly in the brands that you're pushing forward. It's really important to partner with those.
Thank you. I might jump to you, Zoe, as well. Same question, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. I would say from the perspective of Guardian Australia, the change has been less about traffic and more about predictability. So we obviously used to have a pretty reliable highway and we optimised for that specific gateway, and now search and discovery is happening across so many different touch points. We've got AI platforms, social algorithms, search in multiple different kind of contexts. So that sort of led us to really thinking about the importance of our direct audience engagement and our direct audience relationship, what we understand about our highly engaged users, their habits, what they're looking for, where and how they're sort of engaging with that content.
Thank you. Nick, your world's a little bit different. It's very sport-focused, and that experience could be a little bit different for sports fans as well. Has that made you any more insulated, do you think, from this AI effect, or are you seeing search erode?
I mean, we're certainly not seeing search erode. It was really heartening, actually, to hear Google and Microsoft earlier talking about search is not dead, because we certainly haven't felt that. Understand why it is being felt like that around the rest of the industry, but from us, we're actually seeing, like Scott, search traffic, organic search traffic increase year on year. And I think it's down to, I guess, the evolution of the strategy around trusted content, independent voices, and the way that we as a brand, as a masthead, as a publishing company, engage with our audience. And I think that just speaks to having a genuine multi-channel strategy, not just around search, and not pivoting from search to AI, but kind of encompassing that whole ecosystem as a publisher, and making sure that we as a as a brand are part of the conversation in terms of what's happening, in real time, in live events, in sporting games, in matches, in competition, but also the conversation, the discussion that happens around all those sorts of things. And, our bread and butter is kind of news, breaking news, exclusive news, etc. And that's stuff that can't be created by AI and LLMs. It can't be taken over, I guess, in that environment. So, people still come to us for that really timely, relevant content.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And Claire, looping around with you as well, lifestyle, commerce content, obviously something that can be the kind of query that AI assistants like to summarize directly. What's that done to traffic on your site, especially your evergreen and commerce traffic?
Yeah, so look, from a traffic and an audience perspective, we've seen year on year, we're roughly flat. But what we really have seen change is that referral mix, so where that audience is actually coming from. And a good example of this is probably Better Homes and Gardens. So last year, their traffic did drop 30%, and that was mainly due to the LLMs taking that place of that commodity-style content. So we did two things. The first thing we did was shifted away a little bit from that commodity-style content. It's still valuable to make sure we're showing up in the LLMs, but from an audience perspective, looked more at first-person storytelling. And I think that helped us to diversify our referral mix a little bit further and show up in new platforms like Google Discover as well. The second thing that we really did, it was interesting listening to the community discussion just before, was really put our community at #1 across all of our platforms. And we've seen that deliver a huge shift as well. So, for example, a key focus definitely on our owned channels, and EDM's increased their referral back to Better Homes and Gardens by nearly 24%, which is a good result. But broadly taking that overarching strategy, we've seen that Better Homes and Gardens traffic shift to now being up 100% year on year. But I think what's even more interesting than the traffic itself is the intent-driven audience that we're actually getting from our owned channels and that diversified referral mix, because as a result, our affiliate revenue has actually increased 277%, which is huge in a year for one brand. And I think that really speaks to that intent and value of that audience.
Yeah, thank you. And it kind of pushes on to like going beyond classic search engines. So I guess a question for all of you here is, what's happening to those referrals from Meta, TikTok, and new AI assistants, ChatGPT, Gemini, etc.? Is anything replacing any of that lost traffic? Or do you think the total addressable audience is shrinking via the open web?
I don't think the audience is shrinking at all. In fact, it's probably getting bigger. I think the difference now is that the audience is in different places, and you've got to find those different places to talk to the different segments of your audience. No longer can I think any publisher or really any brand just rely on one traffic channel. You can't just rely on social to deliver 100% of your traffic. You can't rely on search to deliver 100% of your traffic. You've got to be in all these different environments. You've got to be, for us, it's search, it's social, it's podcast, it's YouTube, it's making sure, like I said before, we're a part of that narrative, we're a part of the conversation, where sports fans are so highly engaged in a digital environment that, you want to be able to talk to your audience wherever they are and not necessarily make them come to you. So I don't think the audience is shrinking at all. I think it's just more fragmented across different channels and environments.
Yeah, I'll just add to it. I agree with what Nick said, but putting things into perspective, Google still has a 90% market share of overall online search. AI models are about 3 to 5%. So putting that into perspective, it's really important to still focus on the core fundamentals of SEO and marketing. For us, our AI referrals make up about 0.08%, so less than 1% of our overall traffic. We get 1.3 million bot hits to our website a week, but around a 0.34% referral rate from that. So it's very small. A lot of people who are using these AI models aren't wanting to click out to another website. That's not the case with Google AI overviews. People are clicking through to our website, as we've seen with our traffic. So there are some positives there, I think, for people, but you do need to consider that Google is still the main player in this space, and fundamental SEO is really, really important to maintain your brands in those areas.
I would jump in off the back of that. I think it's really difficult to say with certainty the impact of AI search because of the lack of actionable data that we get from the platforms. And I think because we don't have that per feature click-through metric, it makes it very sort of murky for us. But I think for The Guardian, we have trusted very fact-based original journalism that people, when a specific news moment hits, they will invariably come to the source, a trusted source, to validate information that they're seeing, whether that's on socials, in a summary, wherever it might be. And I would say, we reach 35% of all online Australians, and we still kind of need that top of funnel flow of users coming through. That is really important to us. And I think there is a relationship that we're trying to kind of understand and obviously facilitate, an experience for them in a much better way. So having a direct relationship, having registered experiences with our app, with newsletters, with podcasts, we're learning more about them so that we can personalise our marketing at scale, and we're also creating, consented environments for advertisers.
Anything to add, Clare?
No, I think they covered it. I think, definitely the referral mix is obviously really key for us, and, understanding what's coming. And I think, I agree, we're the same. The referrals coming down from LLMs are definitely such a small part, but we are seeing them grow month to month as well.
I might stay with you, Claire, while we're there as well. So let's get into the work and the detail. Obviously, there are a lot of things changing for you and your teams in terms of keeping people engaged from an audience perspective. So have you got any examples of specific pieces of content over the last 12 months that have really helped you to grow audience? And then what made that work as well?
Yeah, I think one really interesting one is one that actually stopped performing, and it was because it stopped performing that we had to look at what we're doing and change what we're doing. So an article that just performs month after month, year after year, forever is how often should I change my bed sheets? It's just apparently what you all want to know about. So it constantly works, right?
We'll do a poll later, yeah?
Well, we basically did, and some of the answers were pretty scary. We'll get to that, but this is kind of the point of it, right? It stopped performing, and we were sort of wondering why this, quality information had suddenly stopped performing. And so we really lent into that strategy of what we wanted to do and place the community at the centre of the content that we're creating. So we went to social and we're like, guys, how often are you changing your bed sheets? And we aggregated that information. And I think I was actually more scared about the guys who changed their sheets. Some people changed their sheets twice a week in summer, which just seemed wild to me. I was like, no, that's far too often. But then it's also, going up to over once a month as well. But anyway, we aggregate all that information, and instead of rewriting the article for search, we looked at pulling the feedback from the users and from our community back into the article. And that really gave that article a more useful lens and a distinctive approach. And obviously the traffic started increasing, and the performance of the article started working again, which is great. But that's definitely been a repeatable lesson for us across the board.
Scott?
Yeah, I'd second what Claire said. And this applies to brands as well, but it's key to focus on what AI can't reproduce. So that comes with original, real human experience. We had an article that's Best Australian Boot Brands. That's up 600% year on year. And that's because we've tried the product. We've actually researched it, original photography. That's the valuable information that AI can't produce itself. It can't wear the product, can't try it. Also, breaking news, which Nick touched on. An AI can't break news. You need a real journalist on the ground to do that. So the more timely information, the more key marketing moments that you guys can jump on, the more key those things will be. And AI can't jump on those moments as well as a human can. So those sorts of things are real opportunities, I think. For us, it's really doubling down on that expertise and real human experience and bringing that to the forefront. The other thing is data came out today as well. How-to content in particular has been declining for a lot of publishers. And I think that's what most people go to AI for. Like I Google everything around the home, how to do it through an AI bot. But listicle and review content's actually performing quite well.
Yeah, good. Constant theme of today that humans are very much still important. Zoe, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I do agree with Scott in a very, very big way. And I think for Guardian in the last 12 months, we've invested really heavily in video content, primarily short form video. So we are thinking very deeply about how our content surfaces off platform. And we're thinking about sort of the personalities and the people who are delivering that content. So building, a presence and a host that has a loyal following. Matilda Bosley on TikTok, who has done incredible work. And off the back of that, we're sort of taking that model and looking at other people, other hosts in other areas, Raf Gatuma. So that has been incredibly valuable because it sort of acts as, a bit of a brand awareness play. We are, surfacing where disinformation proliferates. We're establishing authority in that space. We're eventually building a habit with those people, and that habit is what then ultimately draws them back to our owned property where we can learn more about them, which is also part of a smart sign-in that we trialled in 2025 with Ireland and New Zealand, and then we rolled it out to a band of high-frequency users in Australia earlier this year.
Thank you. I think I'll go on to the role that you play for your brands and clients. So switching focus a little bit into that. So as this search discovery is changing, how is that changing for you, and what role are you playing for the brands that advertise with you?
Search for us and changes in search don't really impact how we go to market, although I think the way that our kind of content strategy has evolved over the last couple of years, we've heard people talking about the human element of content, and whether it's trusted journalists or user-generated content on Reddit or LinkedIn, we've kind of lent into that from a content perspective, in that a lot of our non-editorial products are kind of user-generated. They're kind of gamified products based around what sports fans, what footy fans think, how they feel. It's a passion environment, right? And so from a marketing perspective or an advertising perspective, being able to go to a marketer or an advertiser and say, hey, you can be a part of this conversation where there's a highly engaged audience talking about passion points of theirs, and user engagement, time on site, all those things that are increasing and rising as we kind of work through this phase of our strategy, has been really important. And I think search, being able to say to them that our search traffic and search queries aren't dropping like a lot of brand editorial content is really important as part of that conversation, but it hasn't necessarily changed that conversation from our perspective.
I'd like to add to that just that one thing we always discuss with the brands we work with, 85% of citations in AI models comes from third parties, so that's not from your own brand's website. That's a study from AirOps, so it's something that we're really focused on. 90% of that 85% of third-party content is from reviews and listicles that are showing up in citations as well. So it's really important to continue to work with niche expert publishers. I can say this, we always try and have a separation between our brand and editorial, but it's a lot more easy for me to push the brands who have supported us through paid content with our editorial team. So it is really important to maintain those direct relationships with publishers all across the sector, not just the big legacy publishers, but the niche publishers as well who have that real expertise, because that's the sort of content that is showing up in those LLMs and AI results as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of the conversations we're having in market are around brand visibility in LLMs, and I think the exercise that Karen did this morning was really great to illustrate that just, because you have the biggest budgets or you're the biggest brand doesn't necessarily mean you're going to show up in LLMs. But I do think that all of us is coming from a position of working at publishers who have really trusted brands, authority content, and niche sort of verticals as well. That's all the type of content that LLMs are favouring over the brand-owned messages, which, as Scott said, are a minority signal. And so that's been our focus, and probably more so from a commercial lens. We've launched a commercial product around it called Our Visibility, and our focus there is to help brands or enable brands by leveraging our network and our content to help them show up when those sort of decisions are being made, when those conversations are being had in the LLM environments, and ultimately help them to drive their visibility as well.
Okay, and with the LLMs as well, like, you know, frenemies, I guess it could be seen as. So are any of you in licensing or data partnerships? You see any new revenue opportunities by working together with them, or any defensive necessity to work more closely? How's that working for you guys?
Not us, but I'm open to it. If anyone has any ideas or offers, then yeah, let's have a chat.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak quite openly on this, that we've signed probably 8 or so licensing deals with the likes of ProRata, Tollbit, RSL Collective, you name it. And the revenue that's come in from that is in dollars and cents. It's tiny, absolutely tiny. So the News Corps who are signing the 250 million deals with OpenAI, that's an absolute rarity. Anyone who's talking about AI content licensing saving publishers is absolutely kidding themselves. That is, the exception to that is if something changes from a legislative perspective. I really like the work that the RSL Collective are doing, looking at a similar model to Spotify and the music industry, where the LLMs essentially will pay some of their users' subscription fees to content producers for the use of that content. But I don't think it's going to be a massive revenue driver. It's just too easy to scrape content nowadays for free. We've decided, taking the position not to block any AI bots, and I've seen a really good positive response from that in increased traffic from LLMs, although it is quite small. But having our brand more prominent in those areas is really important as well, because we do have obviously just that general brand building, and I think that applies to brands themselves as well.
Okay, I think we've got about 5 minutes left, so quick fire round. We'll go down the line. We'll start with you, Nick, as well. What's one piece of evidence or case study you'd put in front of a CMO right now to show that your audience and inventory still perform?
I think for us, it comes back to that kind of gamification strategy and the on-site, on-platform engagement to start with. You know, I think metrics have always evolved, and that's nothing new, and will continue to evolve forevermore in this space. So it's not necessarily for us about page views, but it's more that highly engaged audience that you can be a part of that conversation. And you know, if you're looking for scale and volume, then we can certainly help with that. But if you're looking for that kind of, you know, highly engaged audience being part of the conversation, then we can give you that. And I think that's probably, from an advertising perspective, that's been the biggest shift for us.
Zoe?
Yeah, I think loyal audience, high attention, quality content. I think there is huge sort of opportunity for us, obviously, to play in that space. And yeah, I definitely feel like there is a sort of hesitancy around advertising around hard news. And the thing I'd put in front of a CMO is basically a study that was done in 2024, Guardian UK ran with Havas and O2, Telefonica in the UK. And basically they ran half of the impressions on brand safety tags and the other half on hard news content. And the brand safe tags delivered a 4.1 brand lift, where the hard news actually delivered 35.8%. So I think that sort of upends the expectation of where people's attention is, what the impact of sort of advertising next to a hard news piece might be, and sort of what's happening in that experience for a user, that they're not necessarily kind of tailoring their sort of feelings about the journalism to the ad. It's actually like a very sort of different scenario about their attention being so high that they're naturally applying that to the advertising they're seeing in the same space.
I definitely agree. I agree with Nick. I think the value of the audience, the intent-driven audience is so important now. So moving more towards that focus. But I think from a proof point perspective, it would probably be the affiliate revenue again. With our audience being flat, but we're seeing this increase in affiliate revenue across our network up 30%. You know, that's being driven by having that quality audience, a really valuable audience who's intent-driven. And I think that would probably be the key proof point around that.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think it comes back to intent. And where we've already spoken about traffic falling, page views are harder to come by. People, when you're advertising to them on social, are usually not necessarily in a direct buying mode, but when they reach our publishing sites or reading a review, they're much further down the funnel, have much higher purchasing intent. So it's really important to be present in those areas, I would say.
Very good. And Gay made me squeeze a metrics question in. Can't be a session without one as well. So in 12 months, will you be reporting success on different metrics, internally and externally, in relation to audiences and discoverability, to those that you use today?
It's evolved a little bit. We're more focused on things like percentage of signed-in users, revenue per signed-in user, time on site, those sorts of metrics. But the still top-line ones for us are still really important. They're our headline numbers, so it hasn't changed too much.
Yeah, the same. I think internally we're definitely focused on community and brand-owned sites more than perhaps we used to be. So that's probably an internal metric that's changed. Externally, I think the focus probably away from, hopefully in the future, away from volume and visits towards that intent and the value of the audience that we're seeing would be a nice shift as well. But ultimately, I think there's going to have to be a period, and what I'm talking a lot to agencies about is, you know, that shift in measurement and how we're going to deal with really reframing what ROI looks like.
Short answer is yes. Very much moving towards the audience metrics, and our reporting will continue to evolve with the strategy. So obviously the video strategy I talked about, a big transformational project that The Guardian's undertaking globally called Project Berger, after John Berger, is basically to create more multimedia content. So the reporting will naturally sort of sit across where people are spending time, what they're looking for, habits and frequency.
I think it's always evolved, right? I mean, what we were reporting on 12 months ago was different to what we were reporting on 3 years ago. If you go back a decade, we were all just reporting on page views, right? It was all volume, and that was it. And it didn't take long, I think, given that was the scale of the environment, that we all kind of trending towards, you know, instead of number of page views was the time spent on those pages, or the number of pages per user or per session or whatever. Today, it's more around, you know, average time video viewed or podcast listened to, open rates, click-through rates. So it's more about the value of the audience and the value of their interaction or engagement rather than the pure volume play. And I think that will just continue from a brand perspective, a brand metric perspective, when you look at citations and trustworthiness or validation of your brand and your content. What that looks like in 12 months, I don't know yet, but it will certainly look different in 12 months, and then it'll look different again in 12 months from that. So it's always changing.
Thanks, guys. Final one-word answer. How often do you change your bed sheets? Nick, you start.
If you ask my wife, it'll be different to what my
Just come on, give me a number, be honest. I think it's
2 weeks.
2 weeks, not bad, Zoe.
Every week.
Weekly?
Look, it ebbs towards 2 weeks, I've got to say, yeah.
Okay.
Once a week. Yeah.
Once a week. I'll keep mine to myself. Thank you, guys. Cheers.